So last year, in the spring, I was interviewing for jobs, and I was finishing up my time at the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, go Leviathans, and I'm on this mission to make the Leviathans the mascot of HUC. It's a long story. Anyway, and I came here, and they set up all these different meetings with different constituencies. And one of the constituencies that I got to meet with was a group of young professionals. We went out to Hungary's, and that was one of the high points of the interview, was meeting these really cool, really engaged, really thoughtful young professionals. And I met this young woman who I thought was particularly cool and wonderful and thoughtful. And when I accepted the job, I was excited that we would get to be friends and work together and get to know each other really well. And then she announced to me that she was leaving to go to the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, go Leviathans, to study Jewish education, and she left me. And so we didn't get to become friends in person, but we have, over the course of the year, become friends online, and she has shared her wonderful experience with me as I got to know this community and welcomed me even though she did it from afar. And we are thrilled to have her back, thrilled to get to learn from you, to get to learn a little bit about your Israel experience, to get to learn a little bit about the Jewish professional that you are growing into, and get to welcome you back home. So Michelle Blumenthal, will you share some words of Torah with us?
I am home. These are the words I uttered upon landing in Israel in May of 2017, and again as I hugged my mom at IAH just a few weeks ago. As I reflect on how these words bookended my year in Israel as a graduate student at the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, go Leviathans, I cannot help but wonder, what does it mean to be at home? I'm blessed to have multiple homes. I have my family home here in Houston. I have this community, Emanu, which was instrumental in my Jewish journey, both personally and professionally. I have Green Family Camp, the first home that allowed me to be my most authentic Jewish self, and of course, Israel. Now, while I've referred to Israel as my Jewish homeland for many years, living there for an entire year allowed it to truly feel like home for the first time. In doing so, I became a regular at the musical Kabbalat Shabbat services, quite similar to this beautiful service we participated in tonight, with a wonderful community called Nava Tehillah. I developed a nice relationship with my nuts guy and dried fruit guy at the HUC in Jerusalem. His name was Chaim, and besides the fact that he gave me a great deal, he allowed me to practice my Hebrew and never judge me for my many mistakes. I even made it a point to take public transportation, as it made me feel more Israeli. And how can you not? The people watching on Israeli buses is quite fantastic. While I was only there for a year, it was important for me to have these small but powerful moments of rootedness in my new home of Jerusalem. Some people often struggle with this idea of home, just as the Israelites do in this week's Torah portion of B'Ha'alotcha. The Israelites, having received God's commandments at Mount Sinai, and then after some time, God instructs them to leave and continue on their way. As is common with the Israelites in the desert, they took to complaining, which never makes God happy. When God heard their complaining, it is said that a fire of Adonai broke out against them, ravaging the outskirts of their camp. What were they complaining about? Well, like most people who are homesick, they wanted comfort food. In Numbers 11, verse 5, we learn that they craved the fish that they ate in Egypt free of charge, the cucumbers, the watermelons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. All they had to eat in the desert was manna, which they were not too happy about. Now, manna is this sort of mystery substance that God sends to sustain the Israelites throughout their years of wandering. We see it in Exodus 16, verse 4, which states, "And the Eternal said to Moses, I will rain down bread from you from the sky, and the people shall go out and gather each day that day's portion." Now, at first you might think, okay, Bread's not so bad. Maybe I wouldn't want it for 40 years in the desert, but it could be worse. Well, fast forward to this week's Torah portion, in which we read that the manna was like coriander seed and its appearance was like crystal. The Torah goes on to say that the Israelites had to crush it with a mortar and pestle just to cook it into something edible. Oil cakes. Yikes. Oil cakes for 40 years? Okay, I would complain too. I actually encountered my own version of manna as I tried to get settled in Israel. Living in Houston, I became somewhat of a Mexican food snob. As a result, I came to realize that good Mexican food is difficult to come by in Israel. I'll never forget the time I ordered nachos at a place called Burrito Chai, just outside the HUC in Jerusalem. While I thought nachos were pretty hard to mess up, they managed to do it. They used shredded cheese that was barely melted on the chips, and by the time it arrived at the table, the cheese was cold and hard. My manna was Israeli Mexican food. Since I'm in the company of people who know good Mexican food, I can tell you that as I took each bite, I held back my critique and instead imagined that I was eating the delicious white cheddar queso from El Tiempo, because that is my comfort food that makes me feel at home. The Talmudic sage, Rabbi Yossi Bar Hanina, takes a more optimist view on the manna, saying that it came down for Israel varying in taste, in keeping with each Israelite's particular food. To young men, it tasted like bread. To the elderly, it tasted like wafers made with honey. And to sucklings, it tasted like the milk from their mother's breast. How interesting that the manna tasted like the food each person needed to survive. I view this interpretation as the Israelites taking matters into their own hands. Just as I had imagined El Tiempo's queso to get through those nachos, the Israelites imagined that the manna tastes like whatever it was they needed to feel settled, so the desert would feel as much like home as possible. In this case, the Israelites had not only left Egypt, but also Mount Sinai, the place where God spoke to them face to face. By this point, they're walking away from Revelation, away from the full understanding of who they are supposed to be, and with every step they feel that they are walking further from home. In that pursuit of rootedness, the Israelites feel nostalgic to the point that they were unable to notice the miracle of manna to begin with. After all, God rained down bread for them for 40 years. That's pretty amazing. Sometimes, in order to find your sense of home, you have to go through that adjustment period and allow yourself to take ownership of the difficult transition. Unlike the Israelites, who were on the move, inhibiting their ability to feel settled, I had the ability to make Israel feel like a new home. Just as I was living in the Promised Land, settled for the year but feeling nostalgic to be here, I needed to find those ways to make Israel feel like a true home for me. As I became more settled, I enjoyed hosting Shabbat dinners, something I really grew to appreciate during my 4 years here at Houston Hillel. Some of my favorite memories of the year were when my classmates and I enjoyed some home-cooked meals, many of which we learned from our families at home, as we laughed and shared stories of the things happening in our new home of Jerusalem. These people became like family, so it was increasingly special to celebrate Shabbat with them each week. This is the kind of rootedness that the Israelites could have only imagined while wandering the desert. Israel was a fabulous place to call home for a year. Herzl's dream has become a land full of vibrant Jewish life, in which I was able to live through the Jewish calendar in unique and authentic ways. Even while doing mundane tasks such as walking the streets, shopping at the grocery store, riding the bus, you cannot help but feel each Jewish holiday approaching. Flags hang from the streets wishing you Chag Sameach, and countless event posters are displayed all over the city, inviting Jews of all denominations to celebrate each holiday in ways that are meaningful for them. I'll never forget seeing the hundreds of Sukkot built on people's balconies, in the streets, and even attached to restaurants, so that customers could observe the mitzvah of dwelling in a sukkah while also eating a meal at their establishment. These temporary homes were, of course, reminiscent of the temporary homes the Israelites built while wandering the desert. representing such a powerful image of uprootedness, especially in a place that we now call our homeland. The only holiday that I did not fully celebrate in Israel was Passover, but for good reason. As a Jane Weitzman Graduate Fellow in Global Jewish Leadership, I was awarded the opportunity to develop a deeper relationship with the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, often referred to as the Joint or JDC. Not only did my cohort get the opportunity to learn the ins and outs of this amazing organization through the lens of their 3 R's, rescue, relief, and renewal, but we were tasked with spearheading HUC's yearly Pesach project in conjunction with the JDC and the World Union for Progressive Judaism. Belarus became my home for Pesach, as I was lucky enough to spend it with the communities of Minsk, Gomel, and Mogilev. Despite being under Soviet rule from 1917 until 1991, more than a generation's worth of time, these communities have been reinvigorated with Jewish programming for all ages. Today, the Jewish community of Belarus is the 3rd largest in the former Soviet Union, with over 50,000 Jews. It is home to 19 Jewish schools, 2 of which are very successful Jewish day schools, thriving youth groups in multiple cities, a Moishe House and a Hillel to serve college students and young professionals, and countless resources for adults and elderly to develop a deeper relationship with Judaism. Throughout my 7 days there, we attended not 1, not 2, but 6 seders, with demographics ranging from babies to the elderly members of each community. We attended 2 seders in synagogues, 1 seder in a community center, 1 seder in a restaurant, and even 1 in the karaoke room of a nightclub. That was a true first. The community members of each seder were incredibly welcoming and hospitable, even allowing us to add whatever family traditions we wanted into their sacred space. It just goes to show that a seder does not need to happen in an actual home in order for it to feel like one, but rather the community of which you share seder with are who make it feel like a family. The community truly comes to life for every holiday celebration, especially Pesach. Our last and by far my favorite seder was with 10 of the community's elderly women, all of whose husbands had recently passed away. In contrast to the production of the other seders, this took place in the intimacy of one of the women's homes. What made this seder especially unique was when each woman took a moment to share her story, many of which in many ways was her own personal exodus. With our translator's help, we learned of the lives they lived prior to World War II, how they survived the war, as well as life under Soviet rule, and the homes they had built for themselves today. Their manna took form of whatever food they could get their hands on, as they too spent years longing to return home. They remember so vividly how their homes were torn apart as they escaped the Nazis and made their way back to what is now present-day Belarus. Rebuilding their homes was not easy, but as each woman told her story, it was clear that the idea of home was so incredibly precious. Thanks in large part to the JDC's support, these women can now live long, happy lives in Belarus and be truly proud of their Jewish heritage. As I begin my journey to my next home of Los Angeles, California, I cannot be more thankful and appreciative for all of the homes that have shaped me today. I would like to take this opportunity to thank this home, Emmanuel, as the clergy and staff have consistently allowed this space to feel like home for me. Throughout all of my years growing up in Helfman, teaching in Helfman when I moved back 4 years ago, and the privilege to be involved with the Young Professional Committee, Emmanuel has always supported me and nurtured my Jewish curiosity. As one of the institutions that heavily influenced my decision to enroll in HUC, I feel incredibly blessed to have my Emmanuel family and will forever be proud to call this place home. As the saying goes, home is where the heart is. May we all be blessed to have our hearts in multiple homes that make us feel rooted as we surround ourselves with people who love us, support us, and help us tackle whatever manna life brings us. Shabbat Shalom.